Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the Upside to Aging's new vlog series, Let's Talk Aging. My name is Molly Wisniewski, and I am thrilled to introduce to you author, columnist, blogger, and elder care resourcer, Carol Bradley Bursack, here to talk to us today about her book, Minding Our Elders, and her advocacy work in the aging services. So Carol, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Molly. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. I'm really excited to have our conversation today. I think you have so much to offer the listeners, and both family caregivers and professional caregivers. And I'm really excited to have you here with us today. So can you tell us a little about yourself and what services you provide?
I'm a writer. That's the bottom line. And I write blog posts, articles, and whatever anybody needs for websites. I have a newspaper column, all on caregiving and taking care of our elders. And I have also expanded more into senior care. My love for elders probably started when my grandmother came to live with us. I was very close to all of my grandparents. And so that's been ingrained in me. But as I see the world go by and things change, I feel that our elders need to have more resources that they can go to themselves, not only just through their caregivers. So I started out as caregiving support, but I have gone further than that now, sort of expanded into supporting the elders as well in other ways. And I also consult because there are people, many technology places especially, who decide that they want to set something up and they honestly don't know how to connect with their audience. They have the great technology, but they don't know how to connect what caregivers want to hear, and I try and help with that.
That's amazing. That's such a great point, because so many people are trying to get into the field because they're seeing a need, but they really don't. They don't know their clientele, and they don't know the needs that are there. So that's great to hear that that's where you're finding yourself being led into, because it's so needed. Yeah. How did you mentioned your grandparents, having a good relationship with your grandparents. Is that what inspired you to get into the field?
Actually, no. What inspired me was I spent 2 decades taking care of a total of 7 elders.
Wow.
Not all at once, though at one point in time I did have 5 in different places, living in different, some in a nursing home, each in others in their own apartments.
Right.
I was also raising 2 children, one of whom had a lot of health issues. So I was running around a lot. And that was my life. But the trigger point was when my dad, who went in to have surgery, he had a World War II head injury, and he had to learn to walk and talk all over again, and there was a lot involved. But he went on to lead a normal life, and he was in his late 60s, and he started to get just a little bit foggy. No big thing, but they told him that there was some fluid building up behind the scar tissue, and that they should do a surgery to drain that off. And the surgery done, inserting a shunt, is very common, usually successful, often done on younger people who need this, say they've had a car accident or something.
Right.
And he had the surgery. He went in with just this occasional fuzziness. He came out completely, just dementia, completely sunk into dementia.
Wow.
And the shock of that overnight dementia is hard to even explain, because he woke up basically a different person. He had a voice in his head. His brain was really scattered. He couldn't perceive things. He couldn't perceive a lot of reality from say, a TV or something of that nature. And it was overnight. We had no adjusting time. So anyway, I went on with my caregiving with everyone else, and Dad lived that way for 10 years. And I jumped into his life. I got into it with him, and I became his office manager, and we did all kinds of things that I talk about some in my book. But he's the one who was really the impetus of my writing a book. I had to have some kind of catharsis, and I guess that was it. And it was also at a time when there were no support groups like we have now. The internet was in its infancy. Um, even in-person support groups weren't known like they are. So we didn't have very many services. It was not great. And I wanted to do those two things. I needed the catharsis, but I also wanted other caregivers to know they weren't alone. And
Right.
that's why I called it a portable support group. And that's why it's still a fairly popular book, is because I interviewed other caregivers, and all of our stories together, kind of, people find something they relate to in there.
Yes, it's so impactful. It's so impactful. I was going to ask because while I was waiting for your book, you offer a free chapter on your website,
Right.
mindingourbusiness.com, which I'll be linking below for the viewers. And in the chapter, you introduce the reader to Brad, and I found it so moving because I really think that you captured the essence of a caregiver and those emotions that you have to go through and those roles that you have to assume so that you allow a sense of normalcy and a sense of self for the person. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it because it was very impactful. And I wanted to ask if that was actually your father.
Yes.
Yes, it was your father.
Yes, that was, and that's why I called, that's why I put him on the cover of my book, I guess, because even though he wasn't my first of the people who needed care, it happened a few years into that. It
Mhm.
was the most impactful because of the suddenness and the severity.
Right.
And then during the 10 years that he lived with dementia, that's when my mother got so much worse. And she started out trying to be a caregiver to some degree, but she was having her own issues.
Right.
And then eventually she ended up in the same nursing home as my dad.
Mhm.
And for a while, my uncle was in that same nursing home.
Yes.
And had my mother-in-law in an apartment across the way, and just all kinds of things going on.
Wow.
So there was a great deal happening, but Dad was the one that was so jarring, and so this was what got things off the ground.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that because it's so important to know that you have firsthand experience. I mean, your mission is strives from emotion and knowledge and background and experience, and so many people experience the same thing. But I think you're right; they don't know where to turn. Um, so it's great to know. So a lot of people now are talking about the growing needs of family caregivers because there are so many older adults seeking care and they want to age in their own homes. So it uh, ends up being the family caregiver that offers the most support. Um, can you just give us a little take on your experience in this and what you're seeing in the field and the needs of family caregivers?
Well, they need so much, really. The saddest part is that family caregivers lose so much. If they take time to go and to if when it becomes heavy caregiving, even if you're just going after work, before work, all these kinds of things, it builds up.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult because our work system, our employment system is not built the way, to support family caregivers.
Right.
There's a huge difference. When I was growing up, my grandmother, who was very crippled from rheumatoid arthritis, came to live with us. But my mother was at home. And we teenagers were at home, even though I had a little sister. But there were people to be around grandma all the time.
Right.
And it was not a big deal. It was just grandma was part of the family. And this was great. Now, most couples, unless you happen to be independently wealthy or one of the couples makes a lot of money, most couples are both working. And so when this happens, it's a lot harder if they want to age at home, or if you want to have them move in with you or anything of that nature. You're trying to work this into your work life. Or if for a while I did stay home, but the loss for me financially was humongous. And of course, that counts with Social Security and no 401k and all these kinds of things that people who can continue to work would have.
Right.
And this is what happens to caregivers is they make these very hard choices. They want to be supportive. We have wonderful agencies like the Area Agency on Aging and there's programs. Some communities have more support than others, but there isn't enough. There isn't enough so people can have respite breaks. And so caregivers get stretched beyond what they can do. And we need so much more than that. And I know now we have some new legislation they've been trying to get on the book for years, and AARP has been huge with that. They finally got it through, but there's no funding. So, I mean, unless it's funded, I don't want to be negative, but until I see that there's actually funding to back up this wonderful program,
Right.
then I think we're going to get somewhere and caregivers will have some support. But no, we didn't have it before. Going forward, I think there's much, much, much more awareness. I know there is. Just look online. The reality is how much real assistance are people getting?
Right.
And a lot of that depends on your location too. Some states are quite good about senior services and people can age at home and they provide things. Other states, not so much.
Right.
So a location, sadly, because I've moderated forums for national websites, and I have found that locations mean a lot.
Yeah.
It depends on which state you live in and even which city you live in.
Right. That's a great point. And a lot of states, for most states, you have the metropolitan area, but then you also have the rural areas, and the needs are much different.
Much different.
So having states, even those states that are aware of their family caregivers, they also have to be conscious of the variance in
The variance, and it is very hard for the rural ones. My state has a huge rural population, even though I live in a pretty good sized metro area.
Right.
And I just happened to, because I write a newspaper column and have for a dozen years now, one that I just finished, though it won't be online for a couple of weeks, was one that I get, actually it's a question I get frequently, and I only try and address it every couple of years so I don't bore other people, but it's how do we take care of dad? He wants to stay out on the farm. You can't blame dad. He's actually reasonably healthy. But when you have winters like we do up north, you can't blame the family for worrying.
That's
too.
true. What a great.
And it's a very, very touchy subject because you have this rural issue. And then many of the rural people have a much harder time getting doctor appointments. And how do you get the services to them, especially if they're not driving anymore?
What do you think is for family caregivers, particularly you mentioned nursing homes and having access to those types of support systems? Well, a lot of family caregivers, I think, are hesitant about that move into a nursing home. Even respite care is a bit uncertain. A lot of people don't know what it is. What would you recommend to people that are struggling with those types of feelings?
Very difficult. It's very difficult. I've been in both places. I was fortunate enough that my mother, who I knew for quite some time before she went into the same nursing home with dad, I would pick her up every day to take her to see dad and then bring her back home because she was no longer driving. And I know I was getting some feelings from other family members, and they were right. Isn't it time for moms? And they were thinking of me as well. Right. But isn't it time for mom to just kind of join dad in the nursing home? And I thought, well, yeah, kind of. But also, it's not going to be an easy thing. Right. And while falls and those kinds of things are frightening and can be very unfortunate, what happened with my mother was she had a very bad fall and had to call firefighters to pick her up. And we went through this whole thing as we had done on a routine basis. And she was okay when I left her that night for a few hours to go home to sleep. When I went back for her morning shower and things as I did daily, she was still shaky, and she said, "I'm scared. I think I need to go over to Rosewood to be with dad." And I knew if I waited a day or two, she'd probably change her mind. So boy, I was on the phone. I knew them well. I mean, I've been going there for over 10 years at the time to see various people. And I called him and we got the ball rolling, and we got her in. And we slid under the 5 o'clock deadline after she'd had her chest X-ray,
Right. Oh,
and she did have problems adjusting to some degree, but she also knew in her heart she needed to be there, and we were so fortunate because she already knew the staff because of visiting dad, visiting my uncle, all the years going by. So even though it was difficult for all of us, in fact, I came home and I was physically ill, having made that move.
right.
I knew it was the right one.
Yeah.
And I also knew that I could go, see, they were 2 blocks away from where I live.
Oh, that's nice.
And I could go at any time, and I often was called at odd times. And so for me, as hard as the move was, I knew there was no choice, especially for dad after his surgery. Some people will say, well, why didn't you bring him home with you? Well, I was already taking care of 5 elders. And, I can't bring everybody home. And there's just no way I could have done it and under our circumstances at the time.
Right.
So I did my best, and we were blessed. We were truly blessed with good people who to this day, when I run into one of them out shopping somewhere, and even with this metro area that can happen, we'll stare at each other and the tears come. I mean, we'll just, because they were family.
Right.
And so we were truly blessed. It wasn't perfect. We have to watch for the fact that whether it's in-home care that we hire or any kind of care that we hire for respite or for anything else, if we are looking for perfection, we better have the money to pay for one-on-one nursing care and things that most of us can't do. So what we have to do is be an advocate, visit as much as possible, help our parents make that transition. It's not one most of us want, but there again, like my mother, she did feel safer there. And I have to say, with my mother-in-law, when she went into Rosewood, it was a miracle. I mean, she turned around. It's like she dropped 2 years, and she was into dementia.
Right.
She just flourished. She started playing the piano again. She felt safe. When I walked her through the door and I said, do you want to walk down to the hall? We can look out that window and see your condominium.
Right.
No. Do you want to look outside? Let's go on the sun porch. You can see the same view you did from your condominium. No. She felt safe, and it was, oh, hi, Alice. How are you doing, Alice? And she really, really perked up. Yeah. So, there are good things, and these good things can happen.
Yes.
There's the other side. There's some scary things. There's some really, really bad nursing homes still. And even in the good ones, bad things can happen. Right. So being an advocate is essential. It's what we have to do. We have to be part of it and go into this as we want to be part of the care team, not go into it with an adversary role, like I'm here to see what you're doing wrong. I mean, that's a sure way to have problems. Right. You have a long background in long-term care, and how that must feel on that end. Yeah. With family members who go that way, but also when everyone works as a team, it can help.
Right. It's validated. I mean, I think family caregivers are so protective, and they want the best.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And it's very hard for us to give up a certain amount of control because it's so painful. And to give that over to someone else is difficult because we know we can do it right. And that's one of the issues.
I mean, it's not, a lot of times it's not the first incident that somebody moves into a nursing home. The family caregiver has been caring for quite some time. So they have a system, and I don't know, there's a lot of emotions and feelings.
There's a lot of emotions, and I think a lot of it comes from the personality of the people who are taking over too as caregivers. I mean, if they respect the family caregiver. Right. I have been in situations, and I think this is getting better, but with doctors who I knew didn't want me in the room because I would ask questions, and I had, and this same thing had happened in a nursing home or something. It's like, okay, we'll take over now. You can go away. Right. Well, if you've been the caregiver for who knows how many years, and after all, this is your loved one, whether it's a parent, your spouse. I do not want to overlook spouses, because that's, while I haven't been in that situation, it's got to be incredibly painful. And so it's very emotionally difficult to make this move, and yet, you know, you have to get help of some kind.
Right.
And people who have endless funds can often hire enough help. People who don't, what happens is you go into a nursing home and you pay privately until all the funds are gone, and then go on Medicaid. And there again, in some states, you can't tell the difference. I could walk through Rosewood and I didn't know who was on Medicaid and who was not. I mean, the care was across the board.
That's great.
Obviously, if someone was in a private room rather than sharing one at the time, that was a clue. But other than that, no, there wasn't. But I have heard in some states, there's a distinct difference, and it shouldn't be that way, because many people, as in our family, life savings went over 7.5 years of private pay.
Right.
And everything was gone. And so fortunately, my mother only had about 3 months on Medicaid before she died.
Right.
The rest was all private pay. But some people have to go years that way. And so what we need is essentially have a system where there is no difference in the way people are treated.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's true. I mean, everybody deserves equality in their care and
dignity. You know, just dignity and care and compassion. It shouldn't depend on the size of your bank account.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Thank you for that, and thank you for also sharing your mother-in-law's story, because I think that aspect of it isn't always shared. And I agree. Coming from long-term care and working in activities, there is a lot of positive experiences that, you know, for a lot of times an older adult who's living with a family caregiver, they lose more of their independence in that situation than they would in a nursing home setting. So, you know, it's almost like they're gaining that back.
You made essentially a wonderful point that I've tried to point out in the many, many columns I've written over the 12 years, weekly columns, is that it sounds wonderful having mom or dad move in with you, and sometimes it works absolutely beautifully. If you can arrange a situation where the elder has a certain amount of privacy, everyone has a certain amount of privacy, and you know, this can all work out fine. Or perhaps it's an adult daughter or son with one parent, you can make it work. However, in many instances, there's this really busy family with teenagers or children or whatever, and then they bring someone in. And in the case of my grandmother, going back to when I was growing up and her living with us, she didn't need the kind of care where you had to be moving her around at that point in time, moving her around, you know, the nursing care, that kind of thing. It was more to have people around her and with her and have meals with us. And so it was just part of the family. But it doesn't always work out that way. And very, very independent people, adults, moving in with their children, where now their children actually are running the show, so to speak. It's their home. And so the rules are kind of their rules.
Right.
And this doesn't always work for either. And you can't blame anyone. I mean, what parent really wants to start living by their adult child's rules? You know, that's, excuse me. So it can be sometimes a good, and I underline the word good, well-run nursing home that's person-centered can actually give a person, as you were saying, more independence than they can have living with their family. I mean, the ultimate independence is generally living in your own home, and but there again, you may need to bring outside help. Well, when you do that, if you can get the right outside help, it's fantastic. If they can be depended on, it's fantastic. If that doesn't work, then you can run into problems. So however you do it, it's not easy. You just have to make these choices and do what you can.
That's great advice. That's great advice. And I think everybody who is in that situation, and there are a lot of people, as you know, finding themselves in that situation, it's good to know the pros and cons. And I think because of stereotypes, that sometimes goes on the wayside. So
yeah, it does. Stereotypes are very hurtful.
Speaking of stereotypes, could you What do you think are common misconceptions of dementia or Alzheimer's?
That no one's home, that they're not in there. They're acting out when maybe they're acting out because they can't articulate pain. My dad, and this is prior to his going on hospice, I'll use this as an example. He didn't have Alzheimer's. He had, obviously a different type of dementia, but he'd get up on his elbow in his bed and he'd just slam his fist in his hand, just, and grimace. And I kept saying, something is wrong. I mean, he has to be in pain with that. And the nurses agreed with me. It was getting the doctor who looked at records from afar saying, well, he slept this much and whatever, he can't be in pain. And it took quite a while, but it took some very strong nurses to help. And he was ready for hospice care. But that was his only way to get across, was physically that he was in pain. But with someone with Alzheimer's, they're losing, maybe they can't find the right words and they'll say something that makes no sense, and they're trying to tell you they're cold.
Right.
Or maybe they're afraid. They don't understand where they are. So even though if they understood where they were 5 minutes before, maybe that's left them, they're confused.
Right.
Why wouldn't they act out? If they cannot get this across any other way, they're going to act that way.
Exactly.
And so somebody is absolutely in there, even in the later stages. And you have to be careful. One of the things that pains me the most is when people talk about the person like they're not in the room. Or you get the whole family together who's come from out of town, and the person with dementia, they say, oh, hi, Dad, how are you doing? Or hi, Mom, how are things going? And they're uncomfortable. So then they sit and talk to the siblings back and forth.
Right.
And the parent is just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
And, they need to be included. If they can't answer back, it's a smile, a look, a holding their hand, touch, somehow to include them in what's going on. And I guess in everything we do, we have to remember that, whether they can respond. They've known this about people in comas forever.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk about them in the room. Don't say things you don't want them to know or understand, because you just don't know. And I really feel that even in, say, late stages of dementia or Alzheimer's especially, other kinds of dementia probably as well, that's important.
Yes.
That we have to remember we don't understand, and we never will know what they know or understand. And they understand our voice, even if they don't understand the words. They understand touch, many different things that can be understood. Mm-hmm. So somebody is home, somebody is there. And I think that is a misconception that's bad. It needs correcting.
Yes, I completely 100% agree with you. I think that is so eloquently said and so needed to know, because oftentimes that label takes away the person, and that person is, like you said, the person is still there. So
right.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love that. As you speak, you can really tell how invested you are in this field, and that comes from, I think, a place of goodness, and not only experience, but a willingness and to keep going, because I think that there's a lot of adversity that can happen. So,
yeah.
Right, and to go from a family caregiver, then to take your experience and offer that to others, really suggests that you love this field. And I was wondering if there was a particular aspect that drives you forward, that keeps you motivated to do this work.
That would be the connection with people. I have been at this a long time because of all of the years of my caregiving. And then when I went back to full-time work, I still had 3 of my elders alive, though they were in a nursing home. And that piled onto what I was trying to do, and trying to see them every day. And I used all of my vacation time, everything for their doctor appointments, all these kinds of things that you do. And then once my elders had all passed on, I had by that time talked my employer, my newspaper employer, into an elder care column. They were very hesitant for a long time. And I had, my book was out, but they were hesitant. They just didn't know. I wasn't a doctor.
Right.
Whatever, should this work? Turned out it was a hit from day one.
Right.
And it's been going for more than 12 years.
Mhm.
And it's the people who connect with me. And even the ones who may disagree with something I said, that's fine, because I'll go back, I'll say, well, I really like what you said. I understand it. And the reason I said is this. And then I also try and explain such things as word count and those kinds of things you run into when you write a column. But I love that. And but what is so touching is when people say, you balanced things so well between the caregiver and the parents. You
Right.
see
I
both
think
sides.
it's when I
And
get these
my
lovely
lovely responses. And people will say, I have been reading your column for years and I've never written to you, but my mother died and I want you to know how much your column meant to us.
Wow.
And I mean, that's enough to keep me going for another month, I'll tell you.
I'm sure.
And like I said, even when people disagree with me, it still gives me that feeling like I'm counting. Maybe, other people know other things, and medical people know things, and everyone knows something different.
Mhm.
I have a little niche.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of years taking care of different people. I'm a voracious reader. I keep up with what's new online. And if I can do something to help other people, I will. And this is my niche. It kind of sneaked up on me and was given to me. It's not something I sought, but it works.
Yeah, it definitely does work. I mean, um, just the following that you have, and the reach of people that you're inspiring, I think is amazing. Um, what advice would you give? I think what happens a lot with a family caregiver, particularly, and what we're starting to learn more and more, is that once their loved one passes away, that there is a desire to stay connected to the field. What advice would you give to someone who is feeling that way and doesn't really know where to start?
First of all, to give yourself a break if you can. Not everybody can. I didn't take a break from it,
No.
but sometimes it's good to kind of pull back, take a deep breath, and say, how much do I want to be part of this? Um, Taking a break can help. Others need to dive right in because they need the catharsis of doing something. And you see this a great deal in the Alzheimer's community and other dementia communities like Lewy Body and the others, is that they saw so much and they just feel like they need to connect with others who are going through this pain. They've been through long, drawn out declines before death. Some have handled it better than others. They can be parents or a spouse. Sometimes it's both parents. It can go on forever and you become so exhausted. And yet there's such passion because you've seen your loved ones go through so much. And you just feel like I can't just let go. Now I hear from people who say, I don't ever want to even think about this again. And I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that with the subscribers on my newsletter, the ones that drop off, they'll check the box, no longer relevant. And I think, I get you, know, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But there are a fair number of us who want to stay involved. And this is where things like Facebook groups can be really great because they have a lot of them and you can kind of find your niche where whether it's caregiving or dementia or elder abuse or whatever you've witnessed during the years that you've been doing this,
Mm-hmm.
you can get involved and really feel like you're making a difference. And I think all of us, that's part of living, is feeling like we're making a difference. And so this is one way.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow. Well, thank you so much. I mean, the work that you're doing is so impactful and so needed. I think it's a voice that, well, as you know, is often not heard or is often not spoken up because there is such confusion about what it means to be a family caregiver. And I really do think that you're bringing light to this topic in a positive and effective way that's needed. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us today. I think this is really great.
Well, you are a wonderful host, Molly. You made me feel so comfortable, and I truly appreciate this. So, and you have a wonderful site. So I thank you so much.
No, thank you. And so what I'll do is for everyone that I'm sure is going to want to check you out if they haven't already, below in the bio, we'll link to your book, to your website, and even the column that you had mentioned. I think that would be a great resource for people to
Okay,
uh,
that's great.